For his stories, he built an entire pavilion, which the locals sarcastically dubbed the Pavilion of Lies. There, surrounded by hunting trophies, he regaled his audience with tall tales. How he rode into St. Petersburg on a wolf pulling a massive sleigh, and how a cherry tree grew from a deer's head. People listened with great delight. Baron Karl Friedrich von Munchausen had a knack for captivating attention. Some of his stories made their way into the press, and Raspy published a whole book in London about the Baron's adventures. A real living person had transformed into an almost mythical character. Karl Friedrich Hieronymus was the fifth child in a large and very noble Saxon family. He was born in the early 18th century and lost his father when he was just 4 years old. From that point on, his career was more or less predetermined. Boys of his background typically served in the households of more distinguished families and, if lucky, could later pursue a military career. His mother had a tough time managing such a large family all on her own. Fortunately, Karl Friedrich was not much of a troublemaker. A clever boy, he loved to read and would enthusiastically recount what he had read to the entire family. But at the age of 15, it was time to grow up. He became a page for the Duke of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. During his 2 years of service, Munchausen experienced a bit of everything. Pages usually attract little attention, much like small lapdogs. The young baron witnessed romantic escapades, political discussions, and much more. When he was informed that he would accompany Duke Anton Ulrich to Russia, Munchausen was quite pleased. This promised new experiences, and what experiences they were. Russia was a distant, almost mythical land, but rumors of its wealth and unusual customs, they bathe in saunas, women are in charge there, sparked his imagination. Russia did not disappoint. Munchausen's boss, Duke Anton Ulrich, married Anna Leopoldovna, and when she officially became the ruler of the empire, the Duke was made a field marshal, and Munchausen also received a promotion. He was given command of the Life Company. This was a grenadier company of the Preobrazhensky Life Guards Regiment, a true military elite. This incredible rise promised the Baron prosperity in Russia. However, the tumultuous 18th century swept away his ambitions. A palace coup occurred, and the Brunswick dynasty fell under the pressure of Peter the Great's daughter. The Duke and his wife were sent into exile, and Munchausen found his career stalled. He petitioned the Empress multiple times, but it took him 8 years to receive a new rank. It wasn't that Empress Elizabeth Petrovna didn't trust him. He even commanded the honor guard that welcomed the future Catherine too, but she didn't particularly favor the Baron. Meanwhile, back home, the issue of inheritance became pressing. His brothers were dividing the family estate, and Munchausen had to return to his homeland to claim his share. He took a year's leave for this purpose, but he never returned to Russia. He was simply dismissed from service for not showing up, and his last rank, captain, remained with him for the rest of his days. Bodenwerder, his hometown, became his main refuge. There, Munchausen built his Pavilion of Lies, where he welcomed neighbors and entertained them with his astonishing tales. The evenings at the Baron's residence were adored by the locals, a generous and talkative host. What could be better? Munchausen strived to impress more and more, and soon his fame spread far beyond his native region. His stories were passed from mouth to mouth, and some even took the time to write them down. The first to do so was Count Line, who published a book featuring 3 of the Baron's tales. 20 years later, a more comprehensive edition was released in Berlin. Then, in London, Raspy shared the stories of Munchausen. When Raspy's work was translated into German and Munchausen read about his own adventures, he was furious. But what could he do? The book was published anonymously. Who could the Baron possibly sue? Only himself, since the tales were narrated from his perspective, and he was the main character. That Raspy was quite clever. The book spread like wildfire. The amusing and entertaining stories quickly won over European readers, so much so that curious visitors flocked to Bodenwerder. There are accounts of the Baron having to shoo away gawkers from his home when they became too intrusive. What can you do, fame? Munchausen grumbled. this was not how he envisioned a happy and quiet life. His pavilion was now overflowing with visitors. For many years, the Baron was happily married to his fellow countrywoman, Jacobine. She encouraged him to publish his unusual stories, but he brushed her off. When Jacobine passed away, Munchausen mourned her for several years. It was one thing to have fans, but another to lose a true friend and advisor. The Baron made an attempt to rebuild his family happiness, even marrying the young Bernardine von Brunn. The age difference between the newlyweds was 57 years. However, this new wife turned out to be shallow and flighty, and when a child was born, the Baron refused to acknowledge it as his own. He decided to get a divorce, which turned out to be quite costly. It drained nearly all his money and took a toll on his health. Meanwhile, the Baroness simply ran away. Inexhaustible invention, Munchausen died in February 1797th year. However, only the Baron died. The figure of Munchausen lives on to this day. He has become something separate and eternal, and who can truly say how much of it is pure fiction and how much is rooted in the real character?